The interrogation chamber aboard the Zephyrian flagship Dominion's Edge hummed with alien technology. Captain Vera Chen sat bound to a chair that seemed to grow from the floor itself, its biometallic surface pulsing with a sickly green light. Her uniform was torn, dried blood crusted at the corner of her mouth, but her dark eyes burned with defiance that made even her captors uncomfortable. 3 Zephyrian officers surrounded her, their elongated forms draped in ceremonial armor that clicked and whirred with each movement. Their faces were hidden behind masks that resembled twisted silver, but their intentions were clear enough. They had been questioning her for hours, using methods that would have broken most beings in the galaxy. Commander Thexol stepped closer, his breathing apparatus hissing with each word.
"Human, we know you are no ordinary soldier.
Our intelligence networks have whispered of a shadow that haunts our outer colonies, a ghost that strikes without warning and disappears like smoke." Vera remained silent, her jaw set firm. She had endured worse than alien interrogation during her training on Europa. The scars on her arms told stories of battles fought in the darkest corners of space, where humanity's enemies learned to fear the night. "Speak." The second officer, Kixmore, slammed his 4-fingered hand against the metal table. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Tell us your designation, your mission parameters, your chain of command." A small smile played at the corners of Vera's lips. She had been captured during the raid on Kepler Station, but not before completing her primary objective. The data core containing Zephyrian fleet movements was already en route to Earth Command. Hidden aboard a merchant vessel that looked like any other refugee ship fleeing the war zone. The third interrogator, General Voxrain, leaned forward with mechanical precision. His voice carried the weight of authority earned through countless conquered worlds. "We have studied your species for decades, human. We know your weaknesses, your fears, your breaking points. But you are different. Our psychological profiles suggest you are enhanced somehow." Vera's enhanced physiology was indeed beyond normal human parameters. The genetic modifications had been subtle but profound, affecting everything from her bone density to her neural processing speed. She could see in spectrums that didn't exist for baseline humans, react faster than any natural reflexes should allow, and survive in environments that would kill unmodified soldiers in minutes. But the Zephyrians didn't need to know that. They didn't need to know about the experimental program that had created only 12 successful subjects, or that she was the only one still alive after the massacre at Titan Base. They certainly didn't need to know about the nanotechnology coursing through her bloodstream, currently working to dissolve her restraints at the molecular level. "Your silence protects nothing," Thexol continued, his mask tilting as he studied her. "We have already broken your communication codes, mapped your supply lines, identified your key personnel. This interrogation is merely professional courtesy." The lie was obvious enough. If they truly had that information, they wouldn't need her. The truth was that humanity's resistance had become something unexpected, something that defied every tactical model the Zephyrian Empire had developed over 3 centuries of conquest. Unlike other species that fought with honor or desperation, humans fought with a calculated viciousness that seemed to emerge from their very DNA. Vera flexed her fingers experimentally. The nanites had done their work well, though she gave no outward sign of her returning mobility. Her tactical implant was already calculating escape routes, identifying weak points in the chamber's construction, mapping the locations of weapons and potential hostages. "We know you have a designation," Voxrain said, his voice dropping to what might have been considered menacing. "Every operative has a code name, a call sign, something that identifies them to their handlers. Give us this information, and we will ensure your death is swift." The general's offer hung in the recycled air of the chamber. Around them, the ship's systems hummed with activity as the Zephyrian fleet prepared for another assault on human colonies. Soon, thousands more would die in the endless conflict that had consumed half the galaxy. But Vera knew something they didn't. Hidden in the lower decks of this very ship was a device that would change everything. A piece of technology that her team had planted during the chaos of her capture. The Zephyrians thought they had caught a spy, but they had actually invited something far more dangerous aboard their flagship. Kixmore activated a neural probe, its crystalline structure extending toward Vera's temple with predatory grace. "Perhaps we should extract the information ourselves. Human brain patterns are remarkably simple compared to our own neural architecture." Vera finally spoke, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "You really want to know who I am?" The three interrogators leaned forward with anticipation. After hours of silence, their prisoner was finally ready to break. They had seen it happen countless times before with countless other species. Everyone had a breaking point, even humans. "Yes," Thexall breathed, his excitement evident even through the mechanical translation of his words. "Tell us your designation, human. Give us your code name." Vera looked directly into his masked face, her enhanced vision allowing her to see the alien features hidden beneath the silver facade. She could smell his anticipation, hear the rapid beating of his dual hearts, sense the electromagnetic signatures of the weapons carried by the guards outside the chamber. When she smiled this time, it was not the expression of a defeated prisoner but something far more predatory, something that belonged in the vacuum of space, hunting among the stars where humans had learned to become apex predators. "They call me Dark Angel," she whispered, her voice carrying across the chamber like a promise of violence to come. The lights went out. In the sudden darkness, the only sound was the whisper of movement, too fast and too precise to be entirely human. When the emergency illumination flickered to life moments later, Captain Vera Chen was gone, leaving only empty restraints and three very nervous Zephyrian officers who were beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. Emergency klaxons wailed throughout the Dominion's edge as security teams scrambled to respond to the impossible. General Vox Rain stood frozen in the interrogation chamber, staring at the empty restraints that should have been holding their most valuable prisoner. The biometallic chair showed no signs of damage, no indication of how a bound human could have simply vanished. "Seal all decks," Thexall commanded, his voice cracking with barely controlled panic. "Deploy hunter-killer drones on every level. She cannot have gone far." But even as he spoke, Vera Chen was already 3 decks below, moving through the ship's ventilation system with inhuman grace. Her enhanced physiology allowed her to navigate spaces that would challenge even the slender Zephyrians, while her modified nervous system processed the ship's layout in real time. The tactical implant behind her left ear painted a 3-dimensional map of the vessel directly onto her visual cortex. The Dominion's edge was a marvel of alien engineering, stretching nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Its living corridors pulsed with bioluminescent veins that carried both power and information throughout the ship. To most beings, it would have been a labyrinth impossible to navigate without assistance. To Vera, it was simply another environment to master. She dropped silently from an air recycling duct into a maintenance corridor, her combat boots making no sound on the organic floor. The nanites in her bloodstream had finished their work, not only freeing her from the restraints but also beginning repairs to her injured tissues. The cuts and bruises from her capture were already fading, her enhanced healing factor working overtime to restore her to peak condition. 2 Zephyrian technicians rounded the corner ahead, their forearms working frantically with diagnostic equipment as they tried to locate the security breach. They never saw Vera approaching from behind, never felt the pressure points she struck with surgical precision. They collapsed unconscious before their neural systems could even register the attack. Vera appropriated their access cards and continued deeper into the ship. Her mission parameters had been clear from the beginning, though her captors had fundamentally misunderstood her presence here. She wasn't just a spy who had been caught during a raid on Kepler Station. She was a weapon that had deliberately allowed herself to be captured, a Trojan horse in human form. The device her team had planted was hidden in the ship's main power distribution center, a spherical chamber at the vessel's heart where rivers of energy flowed between massive capacitors. Getting there would require passing through the most heavily defended sections of the ship, but Vera had advantages that went beyond her physical enhancements. She paused at an intersection as a patrol of 6 soldiers marched past, their crystalline weapons humming with lethal energy. The Zephyrians had evolved on a high-gravity world where stealth was impossible, and strength was everything. They understood warfare as a direct confrontation between opposing forces, not the shadow dance that humans had perfected among the stars. When the patrol had passed, Vera emerged from her hiding place and followed them at a distance. Her enhanced hearing picked up fragments of their conversation, automatically translated by her implant. They were discussing search patterns, deployment schedules, the impossibility of a single human evading their security grid. They were wrong on every count. Vera had spent the last 5 years studying Zephyrian tactics, learning their weaknesses, understanding how their rigid military hierarchy made them predictable. They thought in terms of overwhelming force and technological superiority, never considering that their enemies might turn those very advantages against them. The corridor opened into a vast chamber where dozens of Zephyrian crew members worked at stations that resembled organic growth sprouting from the walls. This was the ship's command coordination center, where tactical data from across the fleet was processed and distributed. Vera could see the holographic displays showing human colony worlds, marked with symbols that indicated planned assault schedules. New Singapore would be attacked in 18 hours. The mining stations around Proxima Centauri were scheduled for bombardment in 43 hours. Hundreds of thousands of human civilians would die unless someone warned Earth Command of the impending strikes. Vera smiled grimly and activated a sequence on her tactical implant. Somewhere in Earth space, automated listening posts would receive a burst transmission lasting less than a microsecond, encoded in quantum fluctuations that the Zephyrians couldn't detect or decode. The warning would reach the colonies in time, but only barely. Movement sensors began tracking her position as she left the command center, but Vera was already adapting to their coverage patterns. She moved like liquid shadow between their scanning beams, using blind spots that existed for only fractions of seconds. Her enhanced reflexes made it possible to navigate through gaps that shouldn't have been navigable for any living being. An access shaft led down toward the power distribution center, but it was guarded by automated defense systems that could react faster than any biological nervous system. Vera studied the patterns for several minutes, then triggered another sequence on her implant. The nanites in her bloodstream began releasing specialized compounds that would make her nearly invisible to thermal sensors while dampening the electromagnetic signature of her cybernetic enhancements. She dropped into the shaft like a falling star, plummeting past sensor nodes that registered nothing more than a minor atmospheric disturbance. 3 levels down, she caught herself on protruding conduits and swung into a horizontal passage that led toward her objective. The power distribution center was exactly where the intelligence reports had indicated, a perfect sphere suspended in the middle of a cavern that had been grown rather than built. Rivers of energy flowed around its surface in patterns that resembled neural pathways, beautiful and terrifying in their alien complexity. And there, hidden among the power conduits like a metallic parasite, was the device her team had installed. It looked innocuous enough, no larger than a human fist, but it contained enough antimatter to vaporize the entire ship. The Zephyrians had built their vessels to be nearly indestructible, but they hadn't considered attacks from within their own power systems. Vera began climbing toward the device, her enhanced strength allowing her to scale surfaces that would have been impossible for an unmodified human. Behind her, she could hear the distant sounds of search teams growing closer, their coordination improving as they learned to adapt to her tactics. But they were already too late. The Dark Angel had reached her target, and the real mission was about to begin. The interrogation had been nothing more than a distraction, a way to keep the ship's command crew occupied, while she positioned herself where she could do the most damage. As Vera's fingers closed around the activation switch, she whispered a prayer for the human colonies that would be saved by what happened next. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn that humanity didn't just fight back when cornered. Sometimes they struck first. Vera's hand hovered over the activation switch as her tactical implant calculated blast patterns and escape routes. The antimatter device would indeed destroy the Dominion's edge, but that had never been the primary objective. Sometimes the most valuable intelligence came from what the enemy did when they thought they were safe. Instead of triggering the device, she activated a secondary protocol that transformed it into something far more sophisticated. The antimatter charge became a power source for an array of quantum sensors and data taps that would monitor every communication, every tactical decision, every strategic planning session aboard the flagship for the next several months. The Zephyrian Empire was about to become an open book to human intelligence, and they would never know it. A soft chime from her implant indicated that security forces had finally located her general position. They were converging on the power distribution center from 3 different directions, their movements coordinated by their tactical AI systems. Vera had perhaps 90 seconds before the chamber would be flooded with soldiers carrying weapons capable of vaporizing anything human-sized. She began her ascent toward the chamber's exit, but this time she wasn't trying to hide. Her enhanced musculature propelled her up the curved walls at impossible speed, while her modified nervous system calculated trajectory adjustments in real time. To any observer, she would have appeared to be defying gravity itself. The first security team burst into the chamber just as Vera reached the exit portal 40 meters above them. Their crystalline weapons discharged in perfect synchronization, filling the space where she had been with destructive energy that could have leveled a city block. But Vera was already gone, vanishing into the ship's upper levels like smoke dispersing in a strong wind. Lieutenant Commander Zixtel led the pursuit team through corridors that had become a three-dimensional maze of death. His enhanced warriors moved with predatory efficiency, their weapons tracking heat signatures and electromagnetic anomalies, while their tactical systems predicted likely escape routes, but they were hunting something that operated beyond their understanding of warfare. Vera didn't simply evade their searches. She turned the ship itself into a weapon against its own crew. She triggered emergency containment protocols that sealed off entire sections, rerouted atmospheric systems to create toxic gas pockets in strategic locations, and overloaded lighting systems to create perfect cover for her movements. The Zephyrians had designed their ship to be invulnerable to external attack, but they had never considered that an enemy might turn their own technology against them from within. Every system that was meant to protect the crew became another tool in Vera's arsenal. She moved through the ship like a force of nature, striking at isolated guards and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Each encounter lasted only seconds, but left behind unconscious Zephyrians and damaged security systems. Her attacks followed no pattern that their tactical computers could analyze, no strategy that their military doctrine could counter. In the ship's intelligence center, Captain Morvex studied tactical displays that showed their quarry's movement patterns. The data made no sense according to any known military theory. The human appeared to be in multiple locations simultaneously, striking at targets that had no strategic value while ignoring obvious objectives. She's not trying to escape, he realized with growing horror. She's hunting us. The revelation sent ripples of unease through the command crew. They had conquered dozens of species across the galaxy, but none had ever turned the hunt around like this. Most enemies fought with desperation or honor or rage. This human fought with something far more dangerous. Calculated lethality combined with an understanding of fear as a psychological weapon. Vera's real objective wasn't to kill as many Zephyrians as possible, though she could have eliminated hundreds by now if that had been her goal. Instead, she was methodically dismantling their confidence, proving that their supposedly invincible flagship could be infiltrated and controlled by a single human operative. She accessed the ship's communication systems and began broadcasting on frequencies that only human equipment could detect. To the Zephyrians, it sounded like random static. To Earth Command, it was a detailed tactical assessment of enemy capabilities, fleet dispositions, and strategic weaknesses that would prove invaluable in the coming battles. The broadcasts also served another purpose. They told her handlers that she was still alive, still operating, still capable of completing her mission objectives despite being captured. The other enhanced operatives scattered across the galaxy would take this as a signal to begin their own operations, each one a dark angel spreading chaos through the enemy's ranks. General Voxarain arrived at the intelligence center with his personal guard, his mechanical breathing apparatus working overtime as stress hormones flooded his system. He had commanded fleets that conquered star systems, but he had never faced an enemy like this. "How many casualties?" he demanded. 47 crew members unconscious, 12 security systems compromised, and she somehow gained access to our primary communication arrays, Captain Morvex reported. "But sir, there's something else. Our medical scanners detected human genetic material in the interrogation chamber." Voxrain's mask tilted as he processed this information. "Explain." "The prisoner appears to have left behind cellular samples that our automated systems are analyzing. The results are unprecedented. Her genetic structure shows modifications that shouldn't be possible with any known technology. On the displays around them, Vera's DNA profile appeared in holographic detail. The Zephyrian scientists had never seen anything like it. Her genetic code contained sequences that seemed to combine the best traits of multiple species, enhanced with artificial elements that pushed human biology beyond its natural limits. "She's not just a soldier," Morvex whispered. "She's been designed specifically to fight us." The implications were staggering. If humanity had developed the technology to create enhanced warriors like this, it meant they had been planning for this war far longer than anyone had realized. It meant that every tactical assumption the Zephyrian Empire had made about human capabilities was potentially wrong. Vera, meanwhile, had reached the ship's primary computer core, a crystalline matrix that processed information at quantum speeds. Her tactical implant interfaced directly with the alien system, bypassing security protocols that had been considered unbreakable. She wasn't trying to damage the computer or steal its data. Instead, she was planting something far more insidious. A learning algorithm that would study Zephyrian tactical patterns and transmit that analysis to human intelligence networks. The enemy's own computational power would be turned against them, generating battle plans that could predict their every move. As alarms continued to wail throughout the ship, Vera smiled and began her final phase of the operation. She had accomplished everything she had come here to do, but there was one more message she needed to send. A message that would echo through the Zephyrian Empire and reach every alien species that had allied themselves with humanity's enemies. The Dark Angel wasn't finished with them yet. The crystalline matrix of the ship's computer core pulsed with alien intelligence as Vera's implant established its connection. Data flowed between human and Zephyrian technology at speeds that would have fried an unenhanced nervous system. But her modified neural pathways processed the information stream without difficulty. She wasn't just accessing their databases. She was learning how they thought. The Zephyrian tactical doctrine became clear in her mind like pieces of a vast puzzle falling into place. They viewed warfare as an extension of their evolutionary biology, where the strongest species naturally dominated the weaker ones. They had conquered 47 different civilizations using this philosophy, each victory confirming their belief in their own superiority, but they had never encountered a species that could evolve in real time. Vera's genetic modifications weren't just random improvements to human biology. They were targeted adaptations based on detailed analysis of every enemy humanity had faced. The enhanced bone density to survive in high-gravity environments, the modified nervous system to process information at superhuman speeds, the nanite integration to repair damage and enhance performance. She was living proof that humans didn't just adapt to their environment. They adapted to their enemies. Through the computer core, she accessed communications from across the Zephyrian fleet. Hundreds of ships were coordinating the assault on human colonies, their captains confident that victory was inevitable. They spoke of humanity as if it were just another primitive species to be catalogued and conquered. Vera began introducing subtle changes to their coordination protocols. Nothing obvious enough to trigger security alerts, but small modifications that would cause communication delays, navigation errors, and tactical miscalculations. When the fleet reached human space, they would find themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to predict their every move. But her real masterpiece was the psychological warfare component. She accessed the ship's internal communication system and began broadcasting on frequencies that bypassed conscious perception, but affected the Zephyrian nervous system directly. Fear pheromones, stress hormones, subliminal audio patterns that triggered anxiety responses in their alien psychology. The entire crew began experiencing a creeping dread that they couldn't explain or eliminate. They found themselves checking shadows, jumping at unexpected sounds, questioning the security of their own ship. The mighty Dominion's Edge was becoming a vessel of terror, and its crew didn't even understand why. In the Tactical Command Center, General Voxerain studied reports that made no sense. Crew efficiency was dropping across all departments. Security teams were reporting false alarms at unprecedented rates. Medical bay visits had increased by 300%, with symptoms that ranged from insomnia to paranoid delusions. It's her, he realized with growing horror. Somehow she's affecting the entire ship. Commander Thexal's breathing apparatus wheezed as stress took its toll on his physiology. That's impossible. She's just one human. How can she influence 15,000 crew members? Because she's not just any human, Voxerain replied, studying the genetic analysis that had come back from the interrogation chamber. Look at these modifications. Enhanced neural pathways, modified endocrine system, cybernetic integration that operates at the cellular level. She's been designed as a weapon specifically targeted at our psychology. The truth was even more disturbing than they realized. The Dark Angel program hadn't just created enhanced soldiers, It had created living weapons that could adapt to any enemy through a combination of genetic modification, cybernetic enhancement, and psychological warfare techniques that operated below the threshold of conscious awareness. Vera was 12 individuals in one body, each persona trained for different aspects of warfare: the spy who had gathered intelligence, the saboteur who had infiltrated their systems, the psychological warfare specialist who was breaking their morale, the assassin who moved like liquid death through their corridors. And now she was becoming something else entirely. Her implant finished downloading the complete tactical database of the Zephyrian Empire: ship designs, fleet movements, strategic plans, technological specifications, psychological profiles of command personnel, everything that Earth Command would need to turn the tide of the war. But the download had triggered automatic security protocols that were finally beginning to track her true location. Crystalline walls began sealing themselves around the computer core, while hunter-killer drones converged on her position from every direction. Vera smiled and activated. The final phase of her mission, the nanites in her bloodstream, had been quietly replicating themselves throughout her captivity, using trace minerals absorbed from the ship's atmosphere. There were now billions of them flowing through her system, each one programmed with specific objectives that would activate when she chose to sacrifice herself for the greater good. But death wasn't part of her plan today. Instead, she triggered a transformation sequence that had never been tested under combat conditions. The nanites began restructuring her cellular matrix, temporarily altering her biology to survive in conditions that would kill any normal human. Her skin hardened into armor-like scales. Her lungs modified themselves to process the ship's alien atmosphere. Her nervous system accelerated to reaction speeds that defied physics. When the hunter-killer drones burst into the computer core, they found something that their targeting systems couldn't identify. It moved too fast for their sensors to track, struck with force that shattered their crystalline weapons, and vanished into air vents that should have been too small for any living creature. The Dark Angel had become something beyond human, beyond alien, beyond anything that had ever existed in the galaxy before. She was evolution weaponized, adaptation given form and purpose, and she was just getting started. Through the ship's communication systems, she broadcast a message that reached every Zephyrian vessel in the fleet, not words but something deeper, a demonstration of what humanity had become when pushed to the edge of extinction. The message was simple and terrifying. They were no longer hunting a human. They were being hunted by the future of warfare itself. In the depths of space, other enhanced operatives received Vera's signal and began activating their own transformation sequences. Across dozens of enemy ships, Dark Angels began their work. The Zephyrian Empire was about to learn that conquering humanity had been the greatest mistake in their civilization's history. They had awakened something that would reshape the galaxy itself. The transformation was complete, and Vera Chen no longer resembled anything the Zephyrians could classify or understand. Her enhanced physiology had pushed beyond the boundaries of species, becoming something that existed between human and machine, between flesh and pure energy. She moved through the ship's corridors like a living shadow, leaving behind traces of quantum disturbance that their sensors couldn't interpret. In response to her signal, 11 other Dark Angels across the galaxy began their own activations. Each one had infiltrated a key target in the Zephyrian war machine: command ships, supply bases, communication hubs, research facilities. They had waited patiently for this moment, gathering intelligence and positioning themselves for maximum impact. Now they struck as one. The Zephyrian Empire's vast communication network, which had coordinated the conquest of dozens of star systems, began experiencing cascading failures. Ships lost contact with their command structures. Supply convoys received contradictory orders that sent them into ambushes. Research facilities found their most sensitive data corrupted or completely erased. But the real terror was psychological. Across hundreds of ships, Zephyrian crew members began reporting encounters with impossible beings that seemed to phase in and out of reality. Security cameras captured fleeting images of humanoid figures that moved too fast for the recording systems to track properly. Admiral Kethvar, Supreme Commander of the 3rd Assault Fleet, received reports from his subordinates that bordered on madness. Ships were reporting sabotage by beings that couldn't be contained or killed. Entire security teams were found unconscious with no memory of what had attacked them. Most disturbing of all, several vessels had gone completely silent. Their automated systems still functioning, but their crews apparently vanished. "It's a coordinated assault," his intelligence officer reported, his forearms trembling as he processed the incoming data. "But the enemy forces appear to be operating with technology that exceeds our understanding of physics." Kethvar studied the tactical displays that showed his fleet's deteriorating situation. Red warning indicators were appearing across dozens of ships as their systems suffered mysterious failures. But there was no visible enemy fleet, no conventional military force that could be targeted and destroyed. "How many infiltrators are we facing?" he demanded. "Based on the pattern of attacks, our analysis suggests between 10 and 15 individuals," came the reply. "But sir, that's impossible. No force that small could coordinate operations across such a vast area of space." What the Zephyrians didn't understand was that each Dark Angel operated as both an individual warrior and a node in a larger network. Their quantum-enhanced implants could communicate instantaneously across galactic distances, sharing tactical data and coordinating strikes with precision that made them function as a single, distributed organism. Vera, meanwhile, had reached the Dominion's Edge's main hangar bay, where rows of Zephyrian fighter craft waited in perfect formation. These weren't just military vehicles. They were works of art that combined biological engineering with crystalline technology to create machines that were almost alive. She approached the nearest fighter and placed her hand on its biometallic hull. The nanites flowing through her system began interfacing with the ship's nervous system, learning its control patterns and adapting them for human use. Within minutes, she had transformed an alien war machine into an extension of her own enhanced capabilities. The hangar bay doors opened to reveal the vast expanse of space where the Zephyrian fleet hung in formation. Hundreds of ships stretched across the void, their crystalline hulls gleaming with reflected starlight. It was a sight that had struck terror into the hearts of dozens of species over the centuries. But today, they were the ones who would learn fear. Vera's stolen fighter launched from the hangar bay with impossible acceleration, its modified control systems responding to her enhanced reflexes faster than any Zephyrian pilot could have managed. She began a high-speed attack run on the fleet's communication hub, a massive vessel that coordinated tactical data for the entire armada. Behind her, the Dominion's Edge erupted in explosions as the devices she had planted throughout the ship finally activated. Not the antimatter weapon, but something more subtle and far more damaging. Quantum viruses that began corrupting their computer networks, spreading from ship to ship through their own communication links. The effect was immediate and devastating. Ships began reporting system failures that cascaded through their entire infrastructure. Navigation computers provided false coordinates. Weapon systems refused to target correctly. Life support systems began cycling unpredictably, but the real damage was to their morale. The mighty Zephyrian war machine, which had never known defeat, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't fight using conventional tactics. As Vera's fighter danced between the massive warships, she broadcast a message on all frequencies. This time, she didn't hide behind encryption or subliminal patterns. She spoke directly to every Zephyrian in the fleet, her words translated by their own systems into language they could understand. "I am Captain Vera Chen of Earth Defense Command." Her voice echoed through thousands of ships. "You asked for my codename. I told you I was the Dark Angel, but you never asked the right question." Weapons fire began tracking her fighter as the fleet's defensive systems came online, but her enhanced reflexes and the modified control systems made her virtually untouchable. She wove between energy beams and missile salvos like a dancer performing an impossible ballet among the stars. "You never asked what a Dark Angel really is," she continued, her fighter performing maneuvers that violated several laws of physics. "We are what humanity becomes when you threaten our existence. We are evolution weaponized. We are adaptation given form and purpose." Admiral Kethvar watched in horrified fascination as a single fighter craft outmaneuvered his entire fleet. His tactical computers couldn't calculate intercept courses because the enemy pilot was reacting faster than their targeting systems could track. And most importantly, Vera's voice carried across the void. "We are no longer alone." At that moment across the galaxy, the other Dark Angels began their final phase operations, Supply depots that fed the Zephyrian war machine found their stockpiles destroyed or contaminated. Command centers lost contact with their field units as communication networks collapsed. Research facilities that had been developing new weapons against humanity suffered complete data loss. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed invincible just hours before, was suddenly fighting for its survival against an enemy that struck from within their own ranks. They had prepared for conventional warfare, not for the possibility that their enemies might evolve beyond the need for conventional tactics. Vera's fighter completed its attack run and vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a fleet in chaos and an empire beginning to understand that they had awakened something that would hunt them across the stars until humanity was safe. 3 weeks after the assault on the Dominion's edge, the Zephyrian Empire faced a crisis unlike anything in their 3-century history of conquest. Their vast military machine, which had crushed dozens of civilizations, was grinding to a halt as mysterious sabotage operations continued across their territory. Emperor Jexthul convened an emergency session of the War Council in the crystalline chambers beneath the Imperial Palace on Zephyr Prime. The assembled generals and admirals represented the finest military minds in the galaxy, beings who had conquered star systems and exterminated entire species without mercy. Today, they looked like frightened children. "Report," the Emperor commanded, his voice carrying harmonics that could shatter lesser beings' eardrums. His ancient form was encased in ceremonial armor that pulsed with the life energy of a dozen conquered worlds. But even his legendary presence couldn't hide the fear that had infected his military hierarchy. Admiral Kethvar stepped forward, his movement stiff with barely controlled terror. "Your Imperial Magnificence, we have lost contact with 47 major installations across the outer territories. The pattern suggests coordinated strikes by the same enhanced humans we encountered at Kepler Station." "Impossible," hissed General Vexmore, his forearms clicking with nervous energy. "Our intelligence indicates that only 12 of these enhanced operatives were ever created. We've confirmed the elimination of 8 of them in previous operations." Kethvar's mask tilted as he accessed his tactical displays. "That was our assumption, Magnificence. But the evidence suggests that the humans have been reproducing this enhancement process. We're now tracking at least 30 separate incidents that bear the signature of these Dark Angel operatives." The Emperor's breathing apparatus whined with mechanical stress. The humans had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had continued to evolve their capabilities even while under active assault. Every other species the Empire had conquered had fought with whatever weapons and tactics they possessed at the beginning of the conflict. None had developed new forms of warfare in real time. "What of our alliance partners?" Jexthul demanded. "Surely the Corvallian hegemony and the Spiral Consortium have encountered similar threats." The silence that followed was more terrifying than any battle cry. Finally, Admiral Yothek spoke with a voice that trembled despite his military conditioning. "Your Magnificence, the Corvallians report that their entire expeditionary fleet has gone silent. The Spiral Consortium has withdrawn all forces from human space and declared the sector forbidden. In a galaxy where species routinely fought wars of extinction, the word carried weight beyond mere military defeat. It suggested that humanity had become something that defied the natural order, something that other civilizations refused to confront even as allies of the mighty Zephyrian Empire. But the Emperor's concern went deeper than military casualties or territorial losses. His species had evolved as apex predators on a world where survival meant dominating every other form of life. Their entire civilization was built on the principle that the strong naturally ruled the weak, that superior technology and tactics would always triumph over inferior forces. The humans were proving that principle wrong. "Show me the analysis of their enhancement technology," Jexthul commanded. The chamber's crystalline walls came alive with holographic displays that painted the Dark Angel genetic modifications in excruciating detail. What they revealed challenged everything the Zephyrians thought they understood about the limits of biological enhancement. "The modifications aren't just improvements to human physiology," reported Chief Science Advisor Mixtel, her voice barely above a whisper. "They represent a fundamental restructuring of what it means to be human. These beings can adapt their biology in real time to counter specific threats. They're not just enhanced soldiers, they're living evolutionary accelerators." The implications were staggering. If humanity could create beings that evolved to counter any threat, then conventional warfare became meaningless. Every tactical advantage the Empire developed would be met with an adaptive countermeasure. Every weapon they deployed would be neutralized by biological modifications that turned their own technology against them. But there was something even more disturbing in the data. The Dark Angels weren't just adapting to Zephyrian technology. They were learning to incorporate it into their own systems. Several captured weapon fragments showed signs of being modified by technology that combined human cybernetics with alien bioengineering in ways that should have been impossible. They're not just fighting us, General Voxrain realized with growing horror. They're consuming our capabilities and making them their own. On the tactical displays, new reports flowed in from across the Empire. Human resistance cells that had been using primitive weapons just months ago were now deploying technology that rivaled their own. Ships that had been captured during raids were being returned to service with modifications that made them superior to their original designs. Most terrifying of all, there were reports of Zephyrian soldiers who had been captured and released, only to display behaviors that suggested some form of psychological conditioning that operated below the threshold of conscious awareness. They followed orders and performed their duties, but they made subtle mistakes that resulted in mission failures, equipment malfunctions, and intelligence leaks. The humans had weaponized everything: their biology, their technology, their psychology, even their prisoners. They fought with a totality that went beyond conventional military doctrine and entered the realm of existential warfare. Emperor Jexthul studied the data for long minutes while his war council waited in tense silence. His species had faced extinction before, during the early wars that had forged their empire. But those had been conventional conflicts where superior force and tactics could ensure victory. This was different. This was warfare that operated by rules that defied everything they thought they knew about the nature of conflict. The humans weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to transcend the limitations that had allowed species like the Zephyrians to dominate the galaxy for centuries. Recall all forces from human space, he commanded finally. Implement a complete quarantine of their territory. No ships enter. No communications are transmitted. No contact of any kind. Your Magnificence, Admiral Kethavar protested. Such an action would be seen as retreat. Our alliance partners will question our strength. Jexthul's mask turned toward him with mechanical precision. Our alliance partners have already withdrawn from this conflict, Admiral. They understand something that we are only now beginning to grasp. The humans have become something that threatens the natural order of the galaxy itself. He gestured toward the tactical displays showing the spread of human enhancements across their territory. If we continue this war, we risk not just defeat but absorption. They will learn everything we know, incorporate everything we've built, and emerge as something that makes our empire look primitive by comparison. The quarantine order went out across the vast Zephyrian communication network, reaching every ship and installation in their territory. For the first time in their history, the Empire was choosing to contain rather than conquer, to isolate rather than dominate. But in the depths of space, Vera Chen received the quarantine orders through quantum encrypted channels that the Zephyrians didn't even know existed. She smiled as she read the intelligence reports flowing from across the galaxy, each one confirming that humanity's transformation was proceeding exactly as planned. The war wasn't ending. It was entering a new phase, one where humanity would emerge from their quarantine as something the galaxy had never seen before. The Dark Angels had been just the beginning, the first step in an evolutionary leap that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. 5 years had passed since the Zephyrian quarantine went into effect, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The great empires that had once ruled the stars now existed in an uneasy balance. Their expansion halted not by military defeat, but by the knowledge that humanity had become something beyond their understanding. Captain Vera Chen stood on the observation deck of the New Horizon, humanity's first post-quarantine starship. The vessel itself was a testament to how far her species had evolved during their isolation. Its hull incorporated bioengineering principles learned from captured Zephyrian technology, while its quantum drive systems utilized physics that human scientists had developed through analysis of alien computer cores. But the ship's most remarkable feature was its crew. Every human aboard had undergone some level of enhancement, though nothing as extreme as the Dark Angel modifications. They represented the new baseline of human capability, stronger, faster, more intelligent than their ancestors, but still recognizably human in their essential nature. Through the crystalline viewports, Vera could see the edge of quarantine space, where automated monitoring stations maintained their endless vigil. The alien powers had kept their word. No ship had crossed the boundary in either direction for half a decade, but that isolation was about to end. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, her enhanced neural interface allowing her to process navigational data at superhuman speeds. "We're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting permission to establish diplomatic contact." Vera smiled at the irony. The same beings who had tried to exterminate humanity now wanted to talk. The quarantine had given them time to understand what they were dealing with, and apparently, they preferred negotiation to the alternative. "Open a channel," she commanded. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a collection of alien representatives from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Emperor was there, his mechanical breathing apparatus modified with new technology that Vera recognized as human-inspired improvements. Beside him sat delegates from the Corvalian hegemony, the Spiral Consortium, and a dozen other powers that had once viewed humanity as nothing more than another primitive species to be conquered or ignored. Captain Chen, Emperor Zhexthul spoke with a voice that carried new harmonics of respect and carefully controlled fear. "We greet you on behalf of the Galactic Council. We come seeking understanding and perhaps cooperation." Vera's enhanced vision could detect the micro-expressions that revealed the Emperor's true emotional state. He was terrified, but trying to hide it behind diplomatic protocol. The same being who had ordered the extermination of human colonies now spoke with the careful politeness reserved for equals or superiors. "Your Majesty," Vera replied with perfect courtesy, "I'm surprised to hear from you. Last time we met, you were more interested in interrogation than conversation." The reminder of their encounter aboard the Dominion's Edge sent visible ripples of unease through the assembled delegates. They had all studied the intelligence reports from that incident, trying to understand how a single human operative had infiltrated and compromised their most advanced warship. "Times change, Captain," the Emperor replied carefully. "We have come to understand that humanity represents a new paradigm in galactic civilization. Your species has achieved something that we once thought impossible: true evolutionary transcendence during active conflict." Behind Vera, her bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency that would have been impossible for unenhanced humans. Their modified neural systems allowed them to process information and coordinate actions at speeds that made their ship function more like a single organism than a collection of individuals. This was what had truly frightened the alien powers. Not just the Dark Angels with their extreme modifications, but the realization that humanity as a whole was undergoing an evolutionary leap that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. "Were prepared to offer full diplomatic recognition," continued Corvalian Ambassador Thisera, her crystalline features refracting the bridge's lights into rainbow patterns. "Territory, trade agreements, technology exchange. Anything that would establish peaceful relations between our species." Vera considered the offer for a moment, her enhanced cognitive processes running through thousands of possible scenarios and their implications. The alien powers were offering everything they had once tried to deny humanity through force, but the context had changed dramatically. "That's very generous," she replied finally, "but you're operating under a false assumption. You seem to think that we want the same things now that we wanted 5 years ago." The confusion on the aliens' faces was almost comical. They had spent decades studying human psychology, convinced that all species desired territory, resources, and dominance over their neighbors. The idea that a species might evolve beyond those basic drives was apparently beyond their comprehension. "During our quarantine," Vera continued, "we've had time to reconsider our priorities. We've learned that there are more interesting challenges in the universe than competing with other species for finite resources." She gestured toward the viewports, "where stars stretch to infinity in all directions. While you've been maintaining your borders and fighting over trade routes, we've been developing technologies that will allow us to explore beyond this galaxy entirely. We've been preparing for challenges that none of your species have even imagined yet." The silence that followed was profound. The alien delegates were beginning to understand that they weren't just dealing with an enhanced version of humanity. They were facing a species that had evolved beyond the paradigms that governed all known galactic civilizations. "What do you want from us?" Emperor Jexthul asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Vera's smile carried warmth that had been absent during their first encounter. "Nothing, Your Majesty, and that's what makes this conversation possible. We don't need your territory, your resources, or your submission. We've learned to create everything we need, and we're preparing to seek our fortune among the stars beyond this galaxy." She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. "But we're willing to share what we've learned, if you're genuinely interested in cooperation rather than dominance." The offer hung in the space between species, representing a fundamental shift in how galactic civilization might evolve. For the first time in known history, a species was offering partnership without conquest, knowledge without subjugation, cooperation without dominance. Admiral Park leaned close to Vera's ear, her enhanced hearing allowing her to whisper at volumes that wouldn't carry to the communication array. "Ma'am, Earth Command is reporting contact from 12 other Dark Angel operatives. They're requesting permission to return home." Vera nodded almost imperceptibly. The scattered angels were coming back, their long missions finally complete. They had done more than gather intelligence or sabotage enemy operations. They had served as seeds of change that would grow into a new form of galactic civilization. "We'll be returning to our space now," she announced to the assembled delegates. "You're welcome to follow, but understand that the humanity you'll encounter has changed significantly during our isolation. We're no longer the species you tried to conquer." As the New Horizon began its journey back to Earth, Vera reflected on the path that had brought them to this moment. The Dark Angel program had been created as a weapon of last resort, a desperate attempt to defend humanity against impossible odds. Instead, it had become the catalyst for an evolutionary leap that would carry her species to the stars and beyond. They had asked for her code name, and she had told them she was the Dark Angel. But even she hadn't understood what that truly meant until now. She was the herald of humanity's transformation, the first glimpse of what her species could become when pushed beyond the limits of their original nature. And now finally she was going home.